to listen to you, to share what we believe is right and apt for this particular time. Considerations that we have for children in terms of grooming, and to take your feedback into consideration so that once the policy is implemented, we will have not just participation, but we'll have compliance from our students. With me are important persons from the Ministry of Education and Youth. And so it's my pleasure to introduce to you a woman who really needs no introduction. She is the Minister of Education and Youth, the Honorable Favour Williams. There is the Permanent Secretary Acting, Mrs. Maureen Dwyer. We also have with us the Chief Education Officer Acting, Dr. Cassandra, the Senior Director of Planning and Development, that's Mrs. Vivian Johnson. We also have the immediate past president of the National Parent Teachers Association of Jamaica, Mrs. Mitzi Harris Dillon. With her is the current president of the National Parent Teachers Association of Jamaica, Mr. Stuart Jacobs. We have other persons from the Ministry of Education and Youth. We have Deputy Chief Education Officers, Assistant Chief Education Officers, and one such person is Mr. Stephen Carr from the Planning and Development Division of the Ministry. Certainly we have parents, and I suspect one or two children might be in the background listening. So I want to welcome all of you. My name is Kesia Carr, and I'm the Chief Executive Officer of the National Parenting Support Commission. We have to go straight into the program because we are off to a little bit of a late start. I want to apologize for that, but thank you so much. The fact that you are online and you have waited means that this particular consultation is of importance to you. So I now welcome Mrs. Mitzi Harris Dillon, the immediate past president of the National Parent Teachers Association of Jamaica, to offer a word of prayer.
Greetings and salutations, everyone. All protocols observed. Let us pray. Most righteous, eternal, and heavenly Father, you are so good to us. We thank you for this day you have made. You have blessed us with our children to learn and grow in their academic pursuits. You have blessed us with amazing staff and faculties that are dedicated to our students. You have blessed us with leaders to plan and implement policies and measures to continuously improve the education system for our students. You have blessed us with stakeholders who, together with our government ministries and agencies, hold each other accountable in our duties and engagements. You have blessed us with devoted parents in our communities that care about our children's education and school experiences. Thank you for providing parents that are committed to their children and raising them up in the way they should go. We pray that all our goals for our recently started academic year will be centered around helping our students grow in their knowledge of you above all else. We pray for your wisdom and your grace as we navigate extracurricular activities, school curricula, financial needs, and any other topic we are moved to discuss. I pray that you would equip us with what we need to continue to educate our children and provide for their academic development. I pray for your protection over our parents and teachers as we devote ourselves to our children. I pray for your wisdom and guidance, and that we would seek you above all things. I pray you would show us grace and compassion that we can model to our children in our day-to-day lives. I pray that you would equip us in every circumstance, and that we would keep our eyes on you throughout the busy times of the year. I pray for your blessings over our children in all situations, and that you would meet every need they have. I pray that you will guide us here present on this platform through this meeting and help us to be as productive as possible. I pray that our topics would be pleasing to you and that feedback and solutions will be forthcoming. In particular, this evening we pray for insight, knowledge, and understanding of the policy to be discussed. May our hearts, minds, thoughts, and conversations be on one accord as we navigate and engage in meaningful and respectful discourse, striving towards common solutions that will benefit our schools, our students, and our families, as we improve and maintain discipline and organization in whatever we set out to do. Let your will be done, Lord. May those who are traveling make it safely to their respective destinations, and may you keep us all safe. These things we pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you kindly, Mrs. Harris Dillon, for offering that word of prayer. We're moving quickly along, ladies and gentlemen, because we really want to get through and hear from you. So it is my pleasure to now welcome Mr. Stuart Jacobs to greet you from the National Parent Teachers Association of Jamaica.
Thank you. Ms. Keisha Carr, CEO, National Parenting Commission, and moderator for these evenings, Let's Talk, a conversation with parents on grooming. Honorable Favour Williams, Minister of Education and Youth, a friend and open supporter of the NPTAJ. Mr. Smith Harris Dillon, immediate past president of the NPTAJ, predecessor with whom I had the distinct privilege of working with and continues. She's certainly a genuine lover of our kids. Our distinguished guests, members of the NPTAJ Executive, Region Chair, special greetings to Dr. Stephen Carr, with whom I had a fulsome discussion regarding today's proceedings. So thanks for the invitation, and more so to bring greetings on behalf of the National Parent Teachers Association of Jamaica. Parents of Jamaica's children, PTA all across Jamaica, teachers, school administrators, well-wishers, good evening. I bring greetings from the NPTAJ to you all on this occasion, where we will discuss grooming in school as well as other areas of importance in Jamaica's school system. Why is this necessary, one might ask? The NPTAJ's stance on these affairs is that they are relevant, timely, and most value-added to the cause of better educating our children. We are products of our society, and in our case here in Jamaica, so influenced by varying facets, tributaries, if you ask me, of how we carry ourselves. Our children, that next generation, to take on this legacy of Jamaica's education, must learn to appreciate, set standards, even when it may seem to be unpopular, unfashionable, or just plain not stylish. We are the keepers of our children's future, one that must exhibit compliance to law and order as dictated by good ethic, morals, and principles. So it is with attire, physical appearance befitting an organization. Attending a learning institution comes with set precepts based on society's asking, whether we like them or not. In the case where we do not ascribe, there ought to be a civil method in which discontentment are channeled, not to demonstrate with placards and bring a school into the public domain negatively. Instead, through the PTA and other such bodies, a forum should be so designed to mutually figure out. Parents, I urge you to listen and be guided by the words of St. Augustine. Wrong is wrong, even if everyone is doing it. Right is right, even if no one is doing it. Let me take this opportunity to commend the Ministry of Education and Youth and its minister, the Honorable Favor Williams, to be bold and strident at ensuring there is an avenue for parents' voice to be heard. Madam Minister, you have the support of the NPTAJ, and as the newly elected chairman of this august body, we stand ready to carry out the asking of you, our partner in this message of grooming. I ask of you, Madam Minister, after all is settled with this matter, that there be considered a national dress code for all of Jamaica's children attending public school. May you continue to be all-inclusive with all stakeholders, such as the NPTJ sits at your meetings to decide on this. Suffice to say, we will and must respect the religious denominations who have so invested in their schools, some for centuries, and so must have a say in the deportment of their pupils within its halls. They too are to be included. Let's continue to protect our children, their way of thinking, action, and view of why we do things the way it's done, despite not accepting. But it's the way the school mandates. I thank you for your time, and I do hope the proceedings will be value added to all your present. Good night. Thank you.
Thank you very much, President Jacobs, for the wise words you imparted this afternoon. Ladies and gentlemen, we're moving right along, and now it's my pleasure to introduce or to bring to the platform to hear her voice the Minister of Education, the Honorable Favor Williams, who will give an overview of the students' dress and grooming policy. Minister Williams, over to you.
All right, thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Madam Moderator, Ms. Carr. Let me acknowledge our Permanent Secretary Acting, Ms. Maureen Dwyer, our Chief Education Officer Acting, Dr. Kassan Troop, and the team from the Ministry of Education and Youth. I know that they are in the background. Let me acknowledge as well immediate past President, Mrs. Mitzi Dillon from the National Parent Teachers Association of Jamaica, and to publicly thank you for your service as president over these many years. I'm imploring you to continue to contribute to the National Parent Teachers Association of Jamaica, even as that association has elected a new president, Mr. Stuart Jacobs. Thank you so much for your opening remarks and for your support of what the ministry is trying to do in terms of engaging the various stakeholders in this conversation on dress and grooming policy. I'm told at the ministry here that we have never done this before. We have not had these public conversations with stakeholders around dress and grooming. It's been just a lot of talk outside of a formal process, but we are engaged in this formal process. We've met with principals, we've met with some students, we're meeting with parents now, and we will continue. I'd love to see this conversation carried on to the far corners of Jamaica. I know that the virtual space makes that possible, but we would like to be in some rural schools as well physically to engage with students and with parents in those settings. The Education Act and Regulation mandate that the ministry considers the wishes of parents as long as it is compatible with the provision of efficient instruction and training and does not incur unreasonable public expenditure. I'm reading to you from the Education Act of 1962 and the Regulation of 1980, and it's both the Act and regulations are we are in the process of making amendments to them. And of course, that will be a public consultation as well as we go through that. In that act, there's also a requirement for our students to obey school rules. They do have the right of appeal if they feel they're being victimized or unfairly treated. Parents have the option of signing agreement to rules developed by the school. What we here at the ministry, we're not only having this conversation, but we'd like for there to be greater awareness about the processes that schools should have that will allow parents in particular, allow their voices to be heard, and for there to be consensus on matters that are important to parents. Of course, we have to have conversations with our principals as well to help them to understand this inclusiveness that we want to see in our schools in terms of the important stakeholders. I know traditionally we might not have embraced our parents, or schools might not have embraced our parents in the way that we love them to embrace our parents. But we want to begin on that pathway in all our schools, all our public educational institutions across Jamaica. I know that there are different levels of engagement when I look across the system, and we'd love to help those that are far behind and take good practices or best practice from those who are way ahead. We would love for NPTAJ, National Parent Teachers Association, to take a more prominent role than I have seen them taking. Maybe it was because of the pandemic and we were not having these kinds of meetings, or children were not in school. But as they are back in school now, I would like to see the NPTAJ very active in ensuring that schools have fully functioning Parent Teachers Association at the school level, that they are meeting, that parents and other stakeholders have a chance to have input in what's happening at the school, obviously in a respectful way, and that at the end of all of that, the school will benefit from the coming together of all the stakeholders. This afternoon, we want to engage you, our parents, to talk about dress and grooming in our schools. I think there will be a presentation on the overall policy guideline. We want to see dress and grooming policy in our schools at the school level. We would like those policies, when they're implemented, to be non-discriminatory. They should be applied fairly across the school community. They should take into consideration the local context. And by that, I mean, if you go to a school in Mandeville, let's say, Mandeville may be experiencing cooler or way cooler weather than we have in Kingston. And so in the mornings, there may be a requirement for students to wear a sweater. And the school would have decided on what that looks like. So when I talk about the local context, that's what we mean. What's happening in your locale should be taken into consideration, which means that in the corporate area where you have a difference in temperature, you might not have that same context. I want to say as well, as we have this conversation around dress and grooming, what we'd like to convey to our parents, to our schools, is that we would like our children in our primary schools, in our high schools, to show up for school in keeping with the school guidelines for dress and grooming. We're going to ensure that these guidelines were reached in a consultative way in which the parents have some input into the process. I don't believe there's a widespread issue across Jamaica. Many of our students like their uniform, they like the design, they identify with it. The alumni identify with it as well. And I would say maybe 99.9% of our children show up at school in compliance with the dress and grooming policy of the school. But as we've seen, there are those students who, for whatever reason, they show up and they're not in compliance. So you may say, and I've heard the question asked, what does brown shoes or what do brown shoes have to do with education? If a child shows up with brown shoes, but the school rule is black shoes, what does that have to do with education? And what I'd like to say is the rules at school are about discipline. It's about creating an environment in which students are learning that there are rules in society. And there are different kinds of rules. There are safety rules that you must abide by, or else you may just suffer the consequences, and the consequences might be immediate after breaking those rules. And we know what some of those examples of safety rules are when we're traveling on the roads. We have to obey the rules that say, look right, look left, look again, cross when it's clear. Those are rules. We probably don't think about them as rules, but they are. If you're driving a motor vehicle, there are rules about stop signs and stop lights and so on. Those are safety rules. There are safety rules in the kitchen. There are safety rules at different places in the society. And then you have rules to ensure that there is orderliness in our schools or in other institutions. So you may have a rule that children should line up before they go into the cafeteria rather than run and create a bungle. It's to teach orderliness to our children. So the rules about dress and grooming is to say to our children, you are coming to this institution. These rules were established using a process of consultation, consensus. Parents have decided, teachers, principals have come together to decide on the design of the uniform, the length for girls, what kind of pants for boys, and so on. And these decisions may have been taken before you started at that school as a parent with your child. These decisions might have continued through many decades. But it's not up to a parent to decide that you are not going to send your child in accordance with the rules, the dress and grooming rules. Because what you're introducing in the school environment is disobedience. You're introduced when the other children see this particular child, that this child is in a black shoes versus a brown. They're children. They're going to say, "How come? That's unfair. How come I can't wear brown shoes or black shoes?" And you begin to sow dissent in school. Children begin to absorb that as being unfair. You're favoring somebody else versus another. And even though that might sound like a simple example, but you're breaking down kind of the discipline that you want to see in school. So if the rules in school are, if you consider them to be foolish, if you consider them to be old-fashioned, then what I am encouraging, what the Ministry of Education is encouraging, is that we begin to engage a process, a peaceful process. After all, dress and grooming is not a matter of life and death, so we must be able to engage in a peaceful process to have our voices heard. And it can take any form in terms of how you initiate it. You may talk to other parents to say, you know what, I don't like this thing about the uniform. So how do you feel? You may take up a petition. And these things may sound highfalutin, but they're really not. It's different ways for you to engage with others, because in a democracy, which is a society that we have in Jamaica, we need consensus around different decisions in our society. And that's what we'd like to engage our children or parents in the school, because our schools are they reflect society. And we want our children to have a good understanding of what it means to live in a democracy. We want them to have a good understanding of what it means to want peace in the society. To want peace means we have to operate within the rules, or else we have chaos. And we have many examples of chaos. We have chaos on our streets, because many persons decide that, the stoplight is not for me. Oh, the rule says do not overtake the straight white line. No, that's not for me. I'm going to do what I want to do. And we have a society that, it's frustrating for many of us when we see these things, because we understand how much better of a society we could have if every citizen in Jamaica takes it on him or herself to say, you know what, I'm a citizen here, this is our society. We are the ones who created the Constitution. We're the ones who elected members of Parliament to represent us in Parliament and so on. We have to embrace our society as our own and make those individual decisions on a day-by-day basis to live in conformity with the rules that have gone through a process, and they have been agreed by the majority of persons. And so that's what we want to teach our children in school. It's not that we want to make them into zombies, or we don't want to have their creativity shine through, but we want to say to them, in many, many areas of life, there are rules and there's a requirement for you to obey in order for there to be order and discipline in the environment. Could I say, when your children get into tertiary institutions, it's a whole different set of rules, right? Their dress and grooming is more lax, but then you've crossed over from being a child to being an adult, and there are different treatments for children versus adults. So I want to encourage our parents to send your children, your girl children, to school with simple hairstyles. There's no need, in my opinion, to have elaborate hairstyles in schools. They can be creative in many, many ways. Send your male children, again, with simple hairstyles. There'll be many, many years to come that they can decide on their own what their hairstyle is going to be, and length of dress and so on. We have in Jamaica, almost 1,000 schools. Some of those schools, especially our high schools, have well over 1,200, 1,300, 1,400 students within them. So you can see the demands on the principals, the vice principals, to have an orderly school environment. And we do that by creating rules and requiring our children to obey those rules. Yes, I know persons have been asking what happens when those rules are not obeyed. And that's what this conversation is also about. How do we treat with that? We'd love to hear the voices of parents. From the ministry's perspective, we've already said the principals cannot lock out children out of school. That cannot be the first response to dress and grooming violations. That cannot be the first response. But I know that there is a need to create options, if you will. There's a need to have this conversation about what happens when. And so this afternoon, I think when I'm finished speaking, you will have a presentation in terms of an overview of the policy. The policy that we will be talking to you about tonight is not prescribing the rules for particular schools. It's prescribing the overarching directive, meaning your policy at the school level should have gone through a process. It should be written, should be distributed to parents. They would have been a part of that process. It should be fair in its implementation. It shouldn't favor one ethnic group over another, and so on. Those are the overarching directives in the policy. The implementation of the particular school policy is at the school level. And for that, we have to work with our schools to understand what it is that the ministry is requiring of our schools. Uniforms have been in our schools for many decades. The policy, we're saying, needs to be reviewed periodically. So if it is that your policy dates back to 1960, we're asking the schools to dust off that policy, call in your parents and other stakeholders, and go through a process and allow for there to be discussion about the policy and for consensus to be reached. So when you listen to the presentation, you're not going to hear specifics in terms of uniform length or length of hair or you're not going to hear that tonight, because we are saying to our schools that is where your particular policy should be agreed with your parents, teachers, other stakeholders in the system. So I'm going to pause there right now. And just to make one point before I go, I know many times I hear from persons that says, oh, in other jurisdictions, they're doing this and they're doing that. They're allowing this and they're allowing that. And I say, fine, but even in those jurisdictions, regardless of what they allow, there are boundaries. I think the most liberal culture for dress and grooming for children, and I stand to be corrected, is in the United States, a country that a lot of us as Jamaicans visit. Many of us probably have children in those schools as well. I too used to have children in that system. I have family in that system. It's very liberal in terms of what children can wear to school. But that's their society, and they've decided, however they got to that decision, that this is what we'd like to see in our schools. But I can tell you that even in that society, there are still boundaries for the children. So as an example, this is a live example from a relative that I have in a school in the US, high school. He showed up one day in headgear, like a turban on his head. And he was promptly told to take it off, because that's not part of the school uniform. That's not part, even though they go to school in casual clothes, it's still, you know, you're showing up to school and you still have to show up a certain way. And the only reason he was able to continue wearing that headgear was because he went back the next day and said, oh, it's part of my religion. And they said, all right, fine, no problem, but you can only wear these 3 colors. So that example is just to say to you, there are boundaries. Looking from the outside in, you may see that, you know, it looks like it's anything goes, but I can tell you, if you dig down deeper, you will see that there are boundaries in every society on dress and grooming for students. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, let me pause here and I'll turn it back over to the moderator. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Minister Williams. Ladies and gentlemen, we were privy to what I believe are some of the minister's quiet deliberations and her general thoughts on the importance of rules, especially now in 2022, when we see in society at large, so many things have gone awry. She talked a lot about the importance of rules and why, as a country, we need to understand the importance and why we need to abide by rules. From the National Parenting Support Commission's standpoint, we align that to what we call, we talk about in parenting, structure, the importance of providing structure for children so that they understand that society in general is based on these boundaries. I thought Minister did well to give some very practical examples of the rules in society that we all must abide by. So thank you, Minister, for giving us some insights into the things that you think about and making the alignment between the overarching precepts of this policy and how that ties into the expectations of how we should conduct ourselves as we all try to be good citizens in this place we call Jamaica. Thank you so much. I've seen a lot of conversation going on in the chat already. And I noticed too that there are many persons who are trying to get on. May I invite you to join us on the Ministry of Education and Youth's YouTube channel and also the JIS channel as we're streaming live. We want full participation. We thank you so much for your interest. This is what we want. I believe coming out of, as we're coming out of COVID, we're still in a pandemic, I'm being cautioned. It is important to hold on to some of the gains we made, and I did see an increase in parental participation. We want to keep that going. And the fact that we still have 500 persons online at 7:27, it's good. And so many of you are still trying to get on. I want to give a special hello to the Westwood people online. I did see you. I'm a Westwood old girl, and I always take such pride in saying that. So thank you to those of all the representatives from all the schools, but in particular, allow me to be a little bit biased. I love Westwood, and I saw some persons from Westwood coming on. So thank you so much. We're moving right along. And now we invite Dr. Stephen Carr, who is the director from the Policy Analysis and Research arm of the Policy Development Division, Planning and Development Division in the Ministry of Education and Youth. So Mr. Carr, and his title is actually Dr. Carr. And so he will now come to us to present on the specifics of the students' dress and grooming policy.
Thank you very much, Kesia. I want to thank everybody who's online. We know that over 499, and there are people coming in as we speak. Kesia, I want to acknowledge you as the moderator. I want to acknowledge the minister for her speech earlier, which is truly reflective of what we're trying to do with this dress and grooming policy. I want to thank the representative from the National Parent Teachers Association of Jamaica. Stuart, you did a good job in your presentation, as well as Mitzi Dillon. But let me go further by also acknowledging the presence of our PS, Maureen Dwyer, as well as Kassan Troop, our acting CEO. Let me try and share to screen what is it that I'm trying to present to parents as to what is it that the ministry is trying to get at. And so I'm presenting a draft, the draft dress and grooming policy. The idea is that the information that you will provide for us, the information that the students provided for us last Friday, as well as the information from our meeting at JC with principals, as well as board chair, dean of discipline, and guidance counselors. And so what we're trying to get at is a consensus as to what this grooming policy will do in the long run and ensure that the voices of everybody is heard. And so in my presentation today, I'm trying to get you aligned to the aims of the policy, the objectives, as well as the guiding principles and standards. And so they have two aims. The aim is to provide a framework for all public educational institutions. And we are hoping that the private institutions take a look at what we're trying to do, and in such the same standards are copied in private entities. We want to promote good societal values which do not violate individual rights or the laws of the country. Our policy objectives is to ensure that every school have their documented student dress and grooming policy in keeping with this policy that we have. And every student, every parent is aware of that. We want to increase public awareness. We have a policy. So when you understand what is happening on the first week of school, you could easily say, how could that happen when there is a policy in place? We want to increase stakeholder participation, especially from our parents, as well as our students, that we want a dialogue to start in school to say, we would like to, with the consensus of the administration, put together a dress and grooming policy the next time we go around in modifying what we now have. We want to increase compliance so that you'll hear about schools that have no problems, but you'll hear about other schools where there is a problem, and there's a problem that is identified by the guard at the gate when students come in the morning, that the outfit that they have don't match the policy of the school. And so we want to take you through the guiding principles, and the guiding principles surrounds the issue of equity, the issues of diversity, and the issues of inclusion, that everybody ought to be a part of this policy. Everybody, the views and issues relating to everybody is addressed in this policy. We want to ensure a respect for the institutional identity, the ethos, the tradition of the school. The school that I came from, the motto is disque or discede. It means learn or leave. And we understood that we need to do what the school prescribed in order to stay. Because if you don't, you will leave the school before your time is up. So the ethos of the school, the identity of the school, there are schools in Jamaica who started off a tradition of wearing a straw hat. And the straw hat probably generates from the days of slavery when the plantation owners had people working on the fields in straw hats. And that tradition has trended down for years and continue. And it's a good tradition in a school which identifies itself with excellence. We want to ensure that the school administrators have the flexibility to deal with the local context, and the local context might require that the dress code be different from another school. We want to give the school autonomy within defined limits, and those limits will be defined in terms of the policy, in terms of how we change the rule, what the grievance process is involved, how we get everybody to combine to get this thing done. We want to ensure that the students comply, and the compliance is a part of your responsibility as a parent to ensure that students comply. We want to bring in teachers as role models for students and promoting positive values and attitudes. So as part of our mandate to provide this policy, we wanted to be aware that the teachers are also role models in terms of providing the right type of dress, the grooming for all our students. Even though this policy is not about the teacher, we want that the policy advocates that teachers be aware of their role in presenting themselves as a role model. We want the policy to be in the best interest of the child, child-sensitive, child-focused policy, including the safety of the child, the health, the well-being, both physical and psychological. And there are people who are psychologically affected by what happens in our school. And we want to make sure that the policy relating to dress and grooming do not violate those rights. We want to have a respect for inclusivity, that there might be people out there who, for whatever reason, they have an oily skin, their hair needs to be covered. You have to understand the inclusiveness within the schools of those rights of students. And so our policy standards is that the rules should have a legitimate aim, should have a legitimate aim. Why is this rule? Why is this rule in place? They must have a legitimate aim. We also want to ensure that it's principle-based, appropriate to a school setting. We also want to ensure the rule is clear. Some is Matty in our backyard up in Moko won't come to another understanding as to what this rule is saying. The rule is so clear that anybody can follow. We want to ensure that somebody is responsible. A rule should allocate responsibility. Whose responsibility is to ensure that this happens? So it won't happen on day one of school next semester, because there's somebody ensuring that this don't happen. We want to ensure that the rules can be enforced in line of the standards procedure. So the rule is enforceable. That is not the case. Chances are the rule won't be followed by many of our students. And so understand what we're trying to do. We're trying to put in place a policy that will ensure that there's consensus. There's consensus in the school as to what these standards are as it relates to dress and grooming. There's a grievance process in place that in case there is an issue because this child has a physical disability and won't fit into this pants, how do we ensure that there are grievance processes in place to ensure that people are able to maneuver among the rules relating to dress and grooming in these schools? And we want to ensure that there is some system in place that it is reviewed on a basis, maybe 2 to 3 years, and that the ministry monitors the school to ensure that what is said in the policy is actually done. I thank you for listening.
Thank you, Stephen, so much. And now we move into the discussion. I think that it's important to hear from you, the stakeholders who have been mobilized to this platform and other spaces. I know we asked you to join also on YouTube. If we could just put away the slide now so that I can have better interaction with the audience to hear from them as we move to the section of the program where we're actually listening to you parents and what your own thoughts are on the students' dress and grooming policy. Mr. Dr. Carr gave us information just now as to what the considerations are, why the policy is necessary. And so now we're going to open the chat. I already have some questions that I'm going to feed some of the early comments to, and then we will invite other persons who have an opinion to share. So there is a question here. Can we consider a national minimum standard of grooming and dress for both students and teachers? So,
Okay, all right, Ms. Carr, thank you for that question. Can we consider a national minimum standard of grooming and dress for both students and teachers? Yes, because the question is asked that can we consider it? Yes, we can consider it. It's again what we're trying to teach or bring awareness to is a process for how we would do something like that, right? A national minimum standards, even though we don't want to move in that direction because we want schools to implement their particular dress and grooming policy, obviously in alignment with the overarching goals of the ministry's policy, and for there to be the consensus in terms of the policy when the policy is being reviewed, and if there are changes to be made, that goes through an orderly process to get those changes. And while everyone may not be in agreement with the changes, if the majority is moving in a particular direction and the process has been fair and transparent, then it's incumbent on all stakeholders in that particular school to be in alignment with the policy. So yes, it again, because you asked the question that way, in the society, we can consider different things. We can consider that national minimum standard. But again, I'm saying to you, we're providing the overarching policy for our schools, and we're giving them the guiding principles against which their particular school's policy will be measured in terms when we look at the implementation of it, to see if it's being done fairly, to see if there was a process that was engaged, just to see that there's no discrimination based on different ethnic groups and so on. So that's the direction that we would like to move, and that's the direction in which we have been moving from the Ministry of Education and Youth.
Okay, Minister, here is a thought from, I'm assuming it's a parent, and he says, my child was removed from class and put at the school's gate for less than 1 inch of hair. We measured it, and I still have the picture and I can post the evidence. And this was done after I made a complaint about specific teachers who were constantly being late and missing from classes.
That is really, really unfortunate, because we've said many, many times that our children should not be locked out of school. If there's a particular issue, the first port of call should be the parents. Parents should be called in. They should come in depending on the severity of the situation. So we're not in agreement with any lockout of students. We don't want students to leave the school at odd hours of the day to go home to a home in which there may not be an adult. We just don't want that. Once our children come on the school compound, the school stands in the stead of the parents. We have the parental responsibility. And so we cannot, and you'll hear me say that many times, we should not send home the child from school. There has to be other ways in which we deal with the situation. And those are the kinds of conversations that we would like to have with our principals or parents about the what ifs. What if this doesn't happen? What if your child shows up and you're out of compliance? The what ifs are the important conversations that we have to have.
Thank you, Minister. And here's a thought. Not everyone is a Christian. Can we stop applying or asking to apply biblical rules to everyone?
For example?
And in brackets, the person has in school and outside. So there were no specifics, but there seems to be a consideration that the rules that we have are influenced by our Christian beliefs. And the person is saying not everybody is a Christian.
So again, I know that based on how we've been operating in our schools, many schools don't have that robust parent-teacher association. Many schools don't yet have a process that parents can engage, and that is what we are going to ensure that exists in our schools for parents to have an avenue to express their opinion peacefully, to have discussions, and for there to be consensus. All right, and once consensus is reached, as I usually say, then we are obligated to follow the rules because we've reached consensus on them.
Okay, and Mariah Jones has a little bit to say. I believe there is too much focus on hair and clothes, and too little focus on the violent behaviors and theft that go on in these schools. At the end of the day, the victims are being told they need to be responsible. The good Lord allows our hair to grow for a reason. Some rules are made to enslave us and not allow us to grow and love who we are. And the person is saying, this is my piece.
Okay. Again, if I go back to what I said earlier on, rules are meant, some rules exist for different reasons. Some exist for safety reasons. Some exist for law and order reasons, and there are other examples that you can find.
Thank you, Minister. So this Canute Fagan has been writing away. Canute says, if the choice of uniform were left up to students and parents, there would be no stability or culture as it relates to identifiable emblems. Ever so often, a new trend would lead to a clamor for change. We can reference colonialism as much as we wish. However, uniform serves a purpose that transcends such variables as colonialism.
Okay. So I don't think that it would cause instability in the schools for there to be change in the uniforms at school. I'm sure persons on this platform know of schools in which parents have come together and they have agreed that the color of the uniform should be different, the style should be different. There have been changes in our schools. The majority of schools, I dare say, have maintained over the years their uniform. Their alumni identify with it, and parents and everybody is okay with it. But there have been changes at different schools. We ask that parents are involved, especially when you are changing the color of the uniform, the style, and parents have to pay for new uniforms and so on. There has to be a process that you go through at the school to make those changes. And I don't believe that those changes cause instability in the system at all. It's I would say it's this for this particular school community, it's your school. It's the environment that you want to create as stakeholders in your school. We at the ministry would look to ensure that there was a process that was transparent and fair, that parents were told about it, they had a chance to show up and made their voices heard. There was some kind of a process that was, that shows us visibly that there was consensus, that was arrived at. And those are the things that we look for when we look at the implementation of policies and processes in our schools. I know that it may be a little bit different and persons are used to. But we're trying to get our schools, our parents, other stakeholders to understand that change is possible, but there is a particular way you go about making change in our schools. That's what we'd like to teach our children in particular, so that when they become adults, they can advocate for change and know that it doesn't have to be violent in the way that they advocate for change. You can advocate for change peacefully as well.
Okay, so I'll read one more and then I'll actually open the floor for maybe 5 parents, then I'll return to the chat. As parents, and this is coming from Sharon Lawrence, as parents, we need to separate the need to please our children and teach them that society has boundaries. My experience has been that upon entry to the school, a handbook is given before my child even started attending. If there were any rules that, in my opinion, as a parent, were not acceptable, then the choice would be to send him to another institution. It is not about what he prefers as a style and fashion. If a new rule is added and it affects his ability to learn, then as a parent, I will act accordingly. Where the rules are not surprises, the child must be sent home. Sharon has some strong
Okay, and again,
opinions here, Minister, yes.
moderator, we do not support sending our children home for a lot of different reasons. We do not know what may happen to that child on the way home. We do not know what's the condition of that home to which that child is going. The child may be there alone. We have said many times to our principals, do not lock out children from school, do not send them home. The children in the school, they have parents, you must engage the parents, you must call them, ask them to come to school, have a conversation with them. Yes, I hear principals say, yes, when we call parents, they don't come and so on. But we want to engineer a different kind of relationship between parents and schools going forward. Just because it didn't happen in the past that they come to school when you call them, doesn't mean that going forward it's not going to happen. We believe in this process that we're going through right now to raise awareness of the importance of parents being involved in the school life of their children. We want to bring awareness to school rules. We want to bring awareness to a lot of different aspects of how we manage, how we operate our schools, how we think about rules at school and in the society. We want to bring about that change. So I'm not looking back in terms of saying, well, this doesn't happen or never happened or anything. I am looking forward to say, how can we begin a change in our society so that we get a society in which our children coming out of our schools have a sense of order, they have a sense of boundary, they have a sense of respect for adults, they have a sense of respect for each other, their peers. They have a kind of healthy respect for peace in the society. They understand what life is about. They understand how precious life is and that they would never have a thought about taking life. Those are some of the things we want to begin to be in the consciousness of our students. Obviously, we'd love for them to be getting that at home, for it to be reinforced at home, but we know that many of our homes are not functioning the way that we would like them to function in many of our homes, our children are abused. The statistics are there. We have the CPFSA, an agency at the Ministry of Education and Youth. They are our first responder to calls of abuse of children on an annual basis. They get approximately 12,000 calls of abuse of children. And they respond in all those circumstances. And the 12,000 is just the unique number. If you were to look at the repeat cases for a particular child, then you're talking about 50,000 such cases to which they respond on an annual basis. We need to pause. We need to stop as a society and understand that we are really damaging the heart, the minds of our children in our homes by the things that we do and how we relate to them, shouting at them continually, kicking them, denying them food, hitting them with either your hand or with an object. And the statistics and the figures are there for us to see. We are destroying the souls of our children in how we interact with them as parents, as adults, as guardians. We interact with them in a very rough way. And yes, I hear the Bible verse that always comes out when we want to justify physically beating a child. And I want to say to you, there's plenty of research, plenty, that is telling us that we are damaging the psyche of our children when we hit them, when we yell at them, when we hurl expletives at them, when we kick them, when we do all sorts of things to them. And what we're seeing playing out in our schools is just the behavior that they have absorbed in the homes and in their communities. And when they come to school, they don't have a sense of how they interact with other students. So a student may say something that they don't like, and they don't yet have the skills to say, hey, I didn't like what you said, don't say it again, and move on. What they know in their home is that somebody said something you don't like, and suddenly there is a big confrontation, and before you know it, either in the home or in the community, there's a fight, a knife is drawn, a gun. Our children have witnessed violence in their homes, in their communities, and violence has been perpetuated on them. And we really need to stop as a society and understand the negative impact of that, and to know that there are boundaries, there are rules. I know Ms. Carr can speak more eloquently to that, given that she heads the National Parenting Support Commission. And I know she has programs, behavioral change programs for our parents. We really need to stop. The assessment in the early childhood sector, we have done a pilot study looking at our 4-year-olds. This was done maybe 3 or so years ago. And the results that came back is saying quite a large percentage of our children, maybe, let me put some numbers to it, maybe 20% or so, by the time they get to age 4, they are having behavioral issues. They're having early numeracy and early literacy issues, and many of them have behavioral issues. These are some of the things that we have to address in the education sector in terms of intervening in the lives of those students who we've identified as early as age 4 as having behavioral issues. And so I'm saying to you, our parents, we need your support in our schools. We don't need you to come and bad up the teacher, be disrespectful to the teacher, because your children are going to learn what they see. We want to return to an environment in our schools that's civil, where persons have manners, as my grandmother would say, and they understand that we're trying to create order in our schools. We're trying to have an environment in which discipline is the order of the day in our schools, because if we do, we will see that positive result in society in short order.
Thank you, Minister. Coming on the heels of that question, we know the ministry's position on turning away students. However, it is unclear what the sanctions are for school administrators who turn students away or lock them out.
Currently, as far as I know, there doesn't exist yet any such standard in law. As far as I know, I stand to be guided. We're using moral suasion in terms of saying to our principals, do not do that. I understand we need to be need to give them other options, other ways of dealing with it. But we have already said, and many, many times, that cannot be your first response. It just cannot be. Every child has a right to education. We have to be more creative than that in dealing with those what-if situations.
All right, so I do see a hand. Miss Christie, could you please unmute those persons in the background? Thank you so much, GIS, for assisting with that, to have her unmute so she can vocalize her own thoughts, her ideas. We want to hear from everybody. Miss Christie, go ahead, please.
Good evening.
Good
and
evening.
Thank you for engaging us in this way. I'd rather not start my video. I'd rather it remain the way it is. So I won't start. As I said, good evening and thank you for engaging us in such a way. I'm a parent of 2 high school girls and a proud parent as well. I respect rules. I know why rules are established. We don't want anarchy, and there has to be some amount of order. I am in agreement with the first person who had commented that there needs to be a national policy for both students and the teachers. The students need somebody to copy. They need somebody to follow, and they need to follow somebody who's doing the right thing. And who else but our teachers? At the same time, I'm also in disagreement in leaving up the policy making to each school, because this is going to cause a problem, and it's causing the problem that we're having now because each board is deciding what they want to do. All right, case in point, we live in a very hot climate, right? Why is it necessary for a young lady in a box pleated skirt, not even a cotton skirt, but some other thick material, to have her skirt the length just above her socks? What is that proving? And these are the ridiculous things that happen when we leave schools to make up their own policy. It just absolutely does not make sense. If we have something across the board that everyone can adhere to, I think this sort of back and forth that we're having with the schools will not happen, or it will be less of an issue. We're putting too much energy really where it needs not go. Thank you very much, and do have a pleasant evening.
Okay, so can I respond to that?
Yes, please do, Minister. Go ahead.
Just to ask this person if they have ever engaged in a process to bring that grievance or those thoughts to the principal, to the board? Have you had other parents? Have you sought other parents to come on board with you? Have you sought to see if other parents are also in agreement with what you're saying? Because this is what we're encouraging at our schools, for there to be a process where if parents decide, parents believe that the rules don't make sense, that they existed from another era and they were just perpetuated, that they can come together in a way in which, or in an environment in which they can discuss with each other, with the school community, and arrive at a consensus about the way forward. Based on my experience, and I stand to be guided, I don't know that many of our schools engage in that process, which is what we're trying to bring awareness to, in terms of saying, let us, if your school has never ever done this before, you've never reviewed your policy, there's a requirement for you to review it and have the stakeholders at the table. And if there are changes to be made, we believe that that's a better environment in which those changes can be made.
Is that a question I should answer?
Yes, and my question was, have you ever engaged in a process at the school, and what was the outcome?
To be honest with you, before I even started to write down the names of the schools for my children for high school to choose for PEP, that was one of the things that I considered. The uniform. If to me as a parent, I'm not in agreement with the length of the skirt or the design of the uniform, I opt otherwise, right? Now, the schools are telling parents that rules are rules. Rules are set for, yes, we know they are set for a reason, but a rule just cannot be a rule in itself. There has to be a particular kind of, it must make sense, right? So they just say rules are rules, and that's where it ends.
No, agreed that the rules have to make sense. And what we're saying, we're encouraging a process for there to be discussion about the rules engaged at the school.
Thank you. So, Minister, let me quickly, and parents on the platform, let me move quickly to Makisha Bryan. Thank you, parent, for your comments and for participating. And we hear your passion on the issue. And we appreciate the comments that you've made, also your contribution to this process. So, Makisha Bryan, if you will just unmute, kindly unmute, and go ahead with your comments or question. We'll take 5 of these, and I'll return to the chat, and then we'll come back to you.
All right, good night, everyone.
Good night. Go ahead, please.
Good night, everyone. Members
Go
of
ahead,
the
please.
panel,
Good night. Yes.
Lord Minister, parents. I just like to say that I'm also in agreement with the rules that are set by the schools. Rules are rules. I think that each child should adhere to the rules of each school. Initially, upon entering these schools, they would have been given a handbook with all the rules of the school which they should follow. Okay. The parents, I think most of the times we as parents, sometimes I think we have failed our children. We have failed our children because we are not in accordance with our school rules, right? It cannot be that you send out your child in the morning and you don't know how they dress for school. You know, if they are properly attired. Where are the parents when these children are leaving out for school? Okay. And when they go to school, now it creates problems. I'm not in agreement with the school sending them home, but there is a protocol. They would call the parents and say, look, come and get your child. Your child is not properly attired for school. Okay. The school has all rights to outline the rules and regulation with which children should follow. Parents should play an integral role in their children's life and ensure that when they're going out for school, they're dressed for school. This is a learning environment. Okay. That's it. Thank you very much.
And to that, I would add that we are going to require or schools to review their dress and grooming policy periodically, maybe every 2 years or, every 3 years, but there to be a review process so that if there are any disagreements, if there are any issues, there is a process through which our parents can bring that to the fore for discussion, for there to be consensus reaching in terms of changes that would result from that.
Thank you, Minister. Moving on now, and thank you, parent, for, I think you're Makisha, Miss, for your contribution. I see Shardon King. Could you please unmute? Shardon King Phillips. Are the technicians helping with that, Shardon? If not, could we have someone from the Murray family?
Good night.
Are you great? Go ahead, please.
Good night, everyone. For the parent who spoke about the length of uniform, as the minister says, I would really love for the parent to engage the schools, because I noticed that there are a lot of schools across Jamaica right now who have opted for this length of uniform. And there must be a reason why. Have you ever been inside of a school one day and see when the wind catch the short length of uniform skirt that your child is wearing, and she's trying to hold it down and it won't stay down, and all of her undergarments are exposed? Sometimes those girls are standing on the balcony of the school, and it's the same thing happens. The wind catch the skirt and it's over their head and they're trying to hold it and it won't stay still. I'm thinking maybe that is one of the reasons why a school would choose to bring the length a little lower for that not to happen. The next thing is that what I understand is when some parents are called in for the rule breaking of their children, they do not come. They are called because their children are breaking rules that they have signed to. You have signed a rule. You were told to read. You and your child is to read this rule and sign. So you cannot read rules and sign to it, and then you are going to create animosity about the same rules that you signed to. So I'm saying, before parents make comments, if you do not understand what you are signing to, come in, ask that this be read to me. See if you're in agreement with it before you sign it. Or if you are not agreeing with the rules in this particular school, you have a choice to take your child to another school where you are in agreement with the school. But you cannot sign to a rule and then you're going to try to make your own in the schools. As the minister says, and I strongly agree with her, come in to the school, engage the school fraternity, find out why this is so, why did we do this, before you make all the rules and regulations as to why it should not be so. I want parents to remember that every children, your child might be coming from a particular home, and you know how you have grown your child and how they are supposed to behave. Not every child behave the way you expect them to. when they
Okay,
get
so thank you so much. I'm gonna have to stop you there. Thank you so much for that contribution. I appreciate it so much. Thanks. It's clear that you've been thinking, but we want to get as many persons participating. Minister, do you want to respond to that, or do we
No.
move on?
No, okay, please move on. Ms.
Okay,
Carr.
thank you. So can we now have from the Murray family? And then we'll have Carrie on Taylor. And then I'll move to 2 comments in the chat and then come back. Let's go. Murray family, could you unmute? And given the fact that it's 14 minutes after 8, could you make your comments as brief as possible? We want to get in as many comments as possible.
Okay, good night, everyone. My name is John Murray Brown. I am 11 years old and I'm from Pentecost Primary School. The reason why I came to tell you is because I'm not in agreement with the teachers keeping out the students because of school rules. But some parents must make sure that the students wear the proper school uniform. Because, for example, if a doctor says that the patient should take a specific type of medication and the patient does not listen to the doctor, the patient will suffer. In the same way, the students would suffer if they don't listen to those school rules. And also, what I dare to say is, if the student would listen to the school rules, here we'll have a better future for us children, and I will have a better society.
Okay, what's your name again? Remind me of your name. All right, so that was the 11-year-old from the Murray family. Thank you for your thoughts. Thank you so much. He's saying rules are important. I'm inclined to agree. And based on what I'm hearing, there is consensus that rules are important. I'm not hearing anybody saying that we shouldn't have rules. As to what those rules are and how they will be implemented is perhaps what we're deliberating. So moving right along to Ricardo. Ricardo, could you unmute? Ricardo? All right, Carrie and Taylor, go ahead, please. Unmute and go ahead.
Good night, everyone. Just a question here. Some schools have rules on their the sweaters. Like, for instance, the school sells their sweaters and we should purchase. Question, if in my case, I'm unable to purchase that sweater based on my financial status as it be right now. And sometimes when it rains, the times get chilly and my child leaves early for school. It is his first year. In that case, should I not send the child to school because I'm unable to purchase the sweater for how many dollars it is being sold for? Should I keep him home or should I still send him to school with another sweater because I'm unable to purchase this?
Okay, great question. Minister, go ahead.
Ms. Carr,
Yes, so
I'm gonna ask you to answer that one.
Right, so what I'm hearing from you is that the school is insisting that you must purchase the sweater. And this is irrespective of your financial position. I believe that the Ministry of Education has given clear guidelines in terms of those kinds of impositions. And I think in this particular case, you know, I always wonder when parents make these kinds of comments, because I don't know that we have persons running schools who are not well thinking. So I am suggesting to you that you have a conversation with the school administrator, that's a principal, and let the principal know that you're not in a position to purchase the school blazer or whatever it is that's being sold. I can understand that sometimes the schools are trying to have uniformity because there are chilly days and it just looks a little better. But the considerations for, you know, socio-economic status, that's what one is able to afford, is always going to be a part of that conversation. I can't see a school telling you that your child has to stay home because you can't purchase a sweater. So I would suggest that you re-engage the school on this. And if that fails, the National Parenting Support Commission is here to mediate that situation. You can reach us at 876-560-9272. 560-9272. Thank you so much. Dejan Gordon, and then Winsome Campbell, and then I'll go to some more of the comments in the chat. Dejan Gordon.
You hearing me? So
Go ahead.
My question is it right that when a dean of discipline or a teacher confiscate a student's phone, is the students to pay money to get back their own property?
The short answer, Ms. Carr, no.
Yes, no. Right. That's a short answer, no.
Yeah.
All right, next.
And if such a situation, if that happened, it needs to be reported.
All right, so Minister is saying that a report needs to be tabled with the Ministry of Education in the event that happens. So if an item is confiscated, and in this case, you're saying the phone has been taken away for whatever reason, when that time has expired in terms of the confiscation period, and the phone needs to be returned, we're not in support of the child paying money for his item. Must not happen, okay? All right, Mr. N. Thompson, please go ahead. N. Thompson, please go ahead.
Good evening. Thank you for having this forum. I really appreciate this openness in terms of sharing. But what I want to say is that how we view discipline has a lot to do in terms of how we accept rules. So for me, I feel that a lot of it has to do with the fact that discipline was meant to teach and not to punish. And so I feel that our system is very punitive, and a lot of our rules or guidelines, they are based on colonialism. And so it's important for us to reconsider and go back to the drawing board in terms of looking at some of these policies, because they're very outdated. And I say this from experience because you have some students with needs that, for example, they may be better accommodated in wearing a pants, but school rules do not allow for that. And if it is that we're going to focus solely on uniform to say females should be in skirts, males should be in pants, I feel like the focus needs to be shifted in terms of how we are accommodating students to ensure that they're feeling safe and comfortable in the school environment where learning can take place. And I feel that that is very important as it relates to this conversation around uniform. And another thing that I believe is that this policy should be a national one, in the sense that we can have some consensus, because if it is that each school board can do whatever they please, then it means that we're going to have differential treatment. And students are going to experience that. And that is something that we do not want to communicate to our students. We need to understand that education is a right. And so if the ministry is asking parents by law to send their students to school, or their children to school rather, then the ministry need to ensure that there are certain guidelines as it relates to uniform. And trust me, as an educator, some of these policies, they're very much outdated, and we really need to revisit that. When I think about students who I encounter with special needs and who are not able to function just because of that wearing the uniform, they might need to wear a long sleeve shirt, they might need to wear some. So I feel like the focus should be if students are modest in terms of their attire, as opposed to length and type, whether skirt or pants. I feel like we need to have conversations around that. One other question that I want to ask, just
yes,
quick.
but go very, very quickly. Go very quickly. We're trying to get as many people in.
Related to corporal punishment, I believe it is still on the books and I can be corrected. Why is it that we're taking so long to remove this from the laws? So.
Oh, okay. Please unmute, Minister.
Just saying there's a lot in those comments, but that person, I'm assuming a parent, would have described the situation that we are talking about now. If parents feel that these rules about dress and grooming are from colonial days, then this is where we're saying, parents, please engage the process. We are asking schools to review their policy periodically for this very reason, that those policies may have existed from before independence and they were never reviewed, they were never changed. And we're saying to our schools, there must be a review of your policy in keeping with the broader guidelines of the ministry, and that the review that you do must incorporate the stakeholders at school. So parent, this is what you're talking about, is what we are encouraging in terms of the dialogue that needs to happen in our schools. Your question about corporal punishment, we are in the process of amending the Child Care and Protection Act to outlaw corporal punishment in our schools, in our homes, in public institutions, in Jamaica as a whole. That we're going through that process. As we take it to Parliament, I'm sure there will be discussion about it, and we will open it up to wide consultation across Jamaica. However, as I said earlier on, there's a lot of research that is pointing us in a particular direction that we should be outlawing corporal punishment.
Thank you, Minister. So let me just go back to the chat and read a few of the comments I'm seeing. From Rain Walker, he's saying, I wish some parents could see the way students dress in school today. The boys' pants are so short and tight. And it's a big problem that parents are doing nothing about. What do you really expect the schools to do? And there's another comment here that says, at Denby, they have sweaters, but if we can't afford, okay, so I think we addressed the whole issue about purchasing uniforms or additions to the uniforms and considerations for your own finances, and that you're to really engage a school on that. Here's another comment from Patrice Dennis, and she says, my child goes to Ocherias High School and they are required to wear a slip. Why can't they wear tights or shorts under their clothes? I follow rules, but I'm wondering if slips are a must. And I don't agree with blocking children from classes, all right? Some people don't even know what slips are, but I know, right? I think rules are very important.
So the Ms. Card, these are things that should come up for discussion in a parent-teacher meeting, right? Say, why is this still required? What's the rationale? We don't agree with that, right? This is the process that we're saying to our parents, please engage that process.
I think rules are very important. However, the rigidity in the application of the rules are leaning towards some form of I don't know, some form of substance, I don't know, some form of, well, there are economic, transportation, and length of travel considerations. Here's another comment. I have seen girls in those long uniforms that fall way below their knees. How appropriate is that? Miss, as a grade 7 female, when I am going on steps and there's a class nearby, I simply fold my skirt and tuck it between my legs. The only way that could happen is if a student wants to be seen. So I think there are students on the platforms who are also listening into what their parents are sharing. Too often when students are reprimanded for breaking rules, the parents attack the schools and not the issue at hand. And we've been saying that we certainly cannot support those kinds of behaviors. We want our parents to model the kind of behaviors that we want the children who are looking on to see as appropriate. And certainly attacking teachers and school administrators is not the way to engage. Ladies and gentlemen, it is 8:29 p.m. We've been here for quite a while, and I'm so pleased that persons have stuck around and there's so much activity. We are going to download all these comments. We're going to hold on to them. They will be considered. I think the takeaway, Minister, I'm going to give you the final word here. The takeaway is
Right. All right. Thank you so much, Madam Moderator. You know, I am delighted to have been here this afternoon to hear and to read the many comments. Many parents across Jamaica are very interested in this topic. I hear coming through loud and clear for there to be a national dress code rather than leaving it up to schools and so on. This is what this consultation is about, to hear from you and for us to listen and for us to take on board what you are saying. I'm reading some of the comments in the chat, and I'm appalled at some of the things that I hear happening in our schools that people are describing. So this process that we're going through is extremely important for us here at the ministry, for our stakeholders, our parents, our teachers across the education system to be engaged in this process of dialogue, consultation, letting your voices heard, reaching consensus, and so on. So I'm happy that we began this conversation. We will continue it with other stakeholders. We will circle back so that we can, again, talk to more principals, talk to more parents, more students, and so on. It's an important conversation to have. It's one that we've not had in such a formal way in the country. At least persons in the education sector tell me that. And I believe out of this will come greater awareness about what's happening at our schools. Out of this will come processes that we haven't had in our schools. Out of this, I know, will come active parent-teachers association. Out of this will come a stronger National Parent Teachers Association of Jamaica, the umbrella association. And that's what we want in Jamaica. We want participation across the board from our parents, our teachers, our principals. I hear some persons talk about our teachers modeling the dress and grooming codes that we love our children to model and so forth. Those are conversations for all of us to have in the education sector. It's going to do us well. Again, I say we live in a democracy. Let us employ the rules of a democracy. Let us teach that to our children, and to say that we can come together and have change, have respectful, peaceful, environment in which we can argue our differences, end up with a consensus. And even in those cases where the consensus goes against what you would like, for us to then say, you know, this process was fair, it was transparent, I had a chance to say my piece, I had a chance to put it forward. The rest of parents did not agree, but you know what? I'm going to go along with what the majority of parents and other stakeholders say in the best interest of the children in the school and in the best interest of order in our schools. That's where we want to get to in our society. This society is ours. We wake up every day and we create it. We might not be aware that we're doing, but we do it every day in the decisions we make about whether or not we conform to the laws we have or don't conform. We are creating that society. And I'd love for us to embrace the fact that it is our society now. Yes, in decades past, in centuries past, it was a colonial society, but we're past that. It is ours now to chart the course that we would like, and we want to teach our children, our parents, what is that process that is to be engaged to get those changes that we would like, to begin the discussions that we'd like to see happening in our school communities. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Yes, thank you, Minister. And so I want to extend thank you to Mitzi Harris Dillon and immediate past president, and Stuart Jacobs, the current president of the National Parent Teachers Association of Jamaica. Certainly, I want to thank all of you for having been on the platform. I know Mrs. Tashika Jones, Education Officer from the Policy Analysis and Research Branch of the Planning and Development Division of the Ministry of Education, was tasked to do the vote of thanks, but it is 8:35. And I do hear the buzzers going off as I'm still in the office, so I need to get out of here before the alarms are engaged. I want to thank you so much for engaging. Please continue to engage. Parents, this is what we want. Your involvement is so important. You're an important stakeholder group and we need to hear you. We want your active participation in education, because above all else, you're sending the signal to your child that what's happening to him or her in education matters to you, if it's of concern to you. So thank you so much, everybody, for being here. Thank you, Minister. Thank you, all parents, and even the children who chimed in. Thank you so much. And those of you in the other spaces on YouTube or on Facebook, wherever you are listening and participating, we thank you. And we certainly will take on the advisement all your comments. Please continue to engage in this all-important process we call education. Have a really good evening, everybody, and God bless you all. Thank you.